One, and we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 71 of the FilmBrony Podcast. I am, of course, Nick Canino, the guy in charge of this podcast, and with me, as always, is the guy who created this whole podcast. So, introduce yourself.
Well, what do you know? We didn't wait too long to make the next episode for once.
Nope. This time, I kept my word, and I did promise the following week, but I had a lot of stuff to do. But we are back with a new episode. You guys didn't have to wait any longer. Here it is, episode 71. And tonight we got a pretty good podcast for you guys. We're going to be going over tonight's probably going to be one of the shorter podcasts, given the fact that we have some more films from like the rest of April through the first half of May to talk about. So, but yeah, so this will be one of the shorter podcasts we'll be doing tonight. But in the meantime, before we get to our reviews, why don't we go over what we usually do, which is the Blu-ray showcase.
All right, first up is a duology that's been on YouTube recently, and whose threequel I do not expect to like in December. The Angry Birds movies.
Yeah, and we got a third film coming out later this year.
Yeah, it does not look good at all.
No, it doesn't. I'll say this: at least it looks better than Father-in-Law.
Yeah. Batman Soul of the Dragon.
Nice.
Brain Dead, a.k.a. Dead Alive.
Nice.
Defy Bloods.
Great film from Spike Lee.
Mm-hmm. Frozen River.
Great film.
HUD.
A classic.
Next up, the true winner for Best Animated Feature, Lil Amelie or the Character of Rain.
Nice.
Marini's Black Bottom.
One of the better films from 2020.
The Midnight Sky.
Nice.
Mortal Kombat 2, which we'll be talking about
today, yes. Also, before we move on, hello, Eddie. Hello, Taz. Welcome to the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Project Hail Mary.
I'm going to be getting that very soon.
Ready or Not To, here I come.
Good sequel.
Space Cowboys.
One of Clint Eastwood's best films.
And last but not least, Trial of the Chicago 7.
One of the best films of 2020, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I got a couple Blu-rays myself. There are some that I have bought, but I'm saving it for the next podcast. But anyway, I have 5 Blu-rays with me, so here they are. I'll say this: 90% of them, 95% of them are all are all recent, while one is just a classic. So here it is: Send Help.
One of the better films of early the year.
Yep. Next up, a brilliant return to form for Pixar, Hoppers.
Indeed.
And we will be talking about Toy Story 5 on the next podcast.
Yeah.
Next up, one of my favorite films of this year so far, Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie.
Mm.
And finally, to finish up the modern one, another one of my favorites of this year, and probably the biggest hidden gem of the year so far, The Christophers, with Steven Soderbergh.
Indeed.
And last but not least, one of the best movies ever made, and one of this director's best, Jaws.
Smile, you son of a bitch.
All right. And yes, I got my braces off at last, and I couldn't be any more happier than to get it off. So
yeah.
Yep. Starting this podcast, I am all braces free. Now the only thing I have to worry about is just wearing retainers at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, let's get to the reviews, starting with David Lowery's Mother Mary.
His answer to Black Swan feels like nothing more than a hollow version of that movie. Solid performances and cool visuals and music around, but the characters and themes are either hollow as fuck or stuff you've seen in movies like these before, like Perfect Blue and Sets. So just like Tron Ares feels less like a visually stunning Nine Inch Nails music video and nothing more, this feels like a visually stunning Charlie SCS music video with no substance for me to recommend it as a movie. So seal of accuracy.
You're going to need a bigger Blu-ray. I love that. Yeah, as someone who loved A Ghost Story, The Old Man, the Gun, and The Green Knight, this is probably my least favorite movie David Lowery has done so far. Now, I will say this. The acting was terrific. Anne Hathaway gives out such a magnificent performance as the titular character. Michaela Cole was also brilliant as Sam, and she and Hathaway both have great chemistry as well. The soundtrack was great, and that's thanks to not only Daniel Hart's haunting musical score, but with how brilliant the original songs by Charlie XCX, Jack Antonoff, and FKA Twigs felt. Not to mention, this is one of the best-looking movies I've seen this entire year so far, especially with how magnificent the cinematography was and how beautiful the visuals looked as well. And on top of the film having fantastic costume design, the concert scenes were easily the biggest highlights of the whole film, especially with how they were choreographed, shot, edited, and directed, and it had excellent sound design as well. Now, why is this my least favorite of David Lowery's movies, you might ask? Well, I had a hard time getting invested in the story as a result of it feeling inconsistent and disjointed. I was also very disappointed with the way David Lowery directed the film, since it came up as being jumbled and misguided. And sadly, his writing isn't any better either, especially, and that's mainly because it's trying to say something with the way it explores its themes on fame, stardom, friendship, and trauma by using symbolism and metaphors, yet it never comes to fruition due to how messy and undercooked they felt. There were some editing choices the film makes that came up as being uneven at times, and not only was the pacing such a meandering mess, but I also found the ending, even despite what Lowery was going for with this, to be very underwhelming. Yeah, overall, while the film is beautiful to look at and it features some brilliant performances by Anne Hathaway and Michaela Cole, I sadly found Mother Mary to be uneven, disjointed, and the weakest outing from David Lowery so far. Unless you're a huge fan of A24 and David Lowery, I can't recommend this one. It's not a terrible movie, but it's not something I'll see myself watching again. 5 out of 10 or a C+. Could have been a lot better. And unfortunately, the next film isn't much better either.
Yep, Lee Cronin's The Mummy. And after Evil Dead Rise, I was interested to see how Lee Cronin would reimagine the mummy mythos. And the movie itself was finely shot and acted, and it had some pretty good practical effects and makeup. However, it was a complete mess, feeling less like a mummy movie and more like this Exorcist, Evil Dead wannabe that's both cliched and boring as hell. The editing is all over the place with too much reliance on overcutting. It's actually extremely long and all over the place with all these directions the movie wants to take. And honestly, while it's far from the worst movie, I just can't recommend this movie since it's too unrecognizable to be a mummy movie, too directed and cliche to be an Exorcist movie, and it's just a snooze to sit through. Seal mediocrity.
And before I say my thoughts on the film, let me just say hello, Rhea Kenton. Welcome to the podcast. All right. Yeah, I'm with Søren. To me, this is one of the worst movies I've seen this year so far. I know Lee Cronin wanted to try something different with his take on the Mummy movies, and I don't have a problem with that. unfortunately, this is one of the most boring, inconsistent horror movies I've seen this entire year so far. This is one of those movies where it suffers from identity crisis due to the film trying too hard to be a mix of The Exorcist and meets Evil Dead. And at that point, not only does it feel less like a Mummy movie, but it also feels like nothing more than a convoluted mess. And when the movie, and like I stated before, I understand Lee Cronin wanted to try something different with his take on the Mummy movies, and I don't have a problem with that. But when the movie is entitled The Mummy, it should feel like I'm watching a Mummy movie. And as a result of the film's poor execution and how it tries too hard to be a mix of The Exorcist meets Evil Dead, that's why Lee Cronin's The Mummy fails at being a reimagining of the Mummy franchise. Now, granted, are there some good things in Lee Cronin's The Mummy? Absolutely. Now, Natalie Grace stole the entire show as Katie, while Jack Rayner and Veronica Balkan also delivered some good performances as well. It had excellent cinematography, and when it came to the practical effects in this movie, oh boy, are they gnarly as hell, especially this one scene involving a toenail. Oh, God. To say it had me squirming on the edge of my seat throughout would be an understatement. Woo! Unfortunately, that's about the only positives I have with the film. Yeah, unfortunately, and I'm really hoping Werewolf, like it's a great film later this year, especially since Robert Eggers is back to directing it. But yeah, there are so many things wrong with Lee Cronin's The Mummy that it's hard to determine where to start. Well, first off, not only was the story such a contrived mess, but I was also very disappointed in the way Lee Cronin directed the film, since it came off as being nothing more than a muddled mess. And unfortunately, the screenplay he wrote for the film isn't much better either. In fact, it's one of my biggest issues I have with the film. On top of the film having such atrocious dialogue, you don't give a rat's ass about any of the characters whatsoever, since not only are they paper thin and shallow, but they also made some really dumb decisions throughout the whole film, which really tested my patience, given that it's one of my biggest pet peeves in movies, especially when it comes to horror movies. As for the rest of the acting, I can't say it's terrible, since the rest of the actors, such as Leia, Costa, May, Calamae, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Lily Sullivan and Mark Richardson do their best, but because the material they were given to ended up being terrible, they all felt horribly wasted. The musical score was planned and remarkable, and that's mainly due to it being nothing more than a scrambled mess of noisy chaos. It's clumsily edited, not to mention the film is 20 minutes too long, especially when there are some scenes in Lee Cronin's The Mummy that have no purpose other than just to pad out the runtime, and as a result, it let the film's pacing be nothing more than a meandering mess. It's also filled with cliches that you've seen in other horror movies before, mainly from The Exorcist and Evil Dead. And my biggest problem with Lee Cronin's The Mummy is that the film is not even that scary. As a result of characters making dumb decisions, either for the sake of the plot or to pad out the runtime, as well as throwing in some jump scares that come across as being unbelievably predictable, it lacks any sort of tension it's even trying to go for whatsoever. Yeah, overall, I found Lee Cronin's The Mummy to be one of the most boring, contrived, and inconsistent horror movies I've ever seen, as well as a lackluster reimagining of the Mummy movies. And it's on my list as being one of the worst movies I've seen this year so far. 2 out of 10 or a D. I really did not like this one. Skip this and just watch either the 1932 version of The Mummy starring Boris Karloff, or just watch Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. First two, by the way.
Yeah. Next, we have normal, and honestly, the title is kind of accurate because this was just a normal crime thriller that doesn't really change the game that much. It's well acted and has some fun action set pieces, but none of the characters and story I found super interesting or unique. So I guess make of it what you will. Seal mediocrity.
It's not one of the best action movies I've ever seen, but I did find Normal to be a solid action thriller at the end of the day. The acting was very good, especially from Bob Odenkirk, who once again steals the entire show as Sheriff Ulysses, especially with how much charisma brought into his character. Henry Winkler is also very good as the mayor of Normal named Kim Kibner, and the same could be said with Lena Headey as Moira. I found the soundtrack to be pretty solid. It's got great cinematography as well as decent editing. It's also pretty funny at times too, especially with the amount of quirky humor the movie sprinkles into the mix. There are some tension-filled moments in the second act that did have me on the edge of my seat. And when it came to the film's action sequences, boy, are they a lot of fun to watch. Especially with how over the top and bloody they felt. And Ben Wheatley does a solid job of the way he directed the action in the film. Now, here's why it's not one of the best action movies I've ever seen. Here's why. I immediately found the story to be such an unfocused mess, especially since there were some subplots thrown into the film that felt undercooked. And on top of the film having such a breakneck and uneven pacing, the screenplay I found to be pretty weak, mainly with how underdeveloped most of the characters felt and how jarring and inconsistent the tone felt. And it does have its share of cliches as well, especially when it comes to some of the tropes you've seen in other action films before. Yeah, overall, it's far from groundbreaking, but I nevertheless found Normal to be a fun action thriller featuring another excellent performance by Bob Odenkirk. If you love Bob Odenkirk and you love seeing a fun action movie, then I recommend giving Normal a watch. 7 out of 10 or a B. And to answer your question, I still think the one with Tom Cruise is still worse, but this is up there.
And I'd much rather watch the Tom Cruise one. At least I was entertained by it.
Not me. I hated it.
Next up, we have Michael, and this movie's been hyped up due to it being a biopic of Michael Jackson, and even after the post-production nightmare involving the third act leading to the producers deciding to only make it about his rise up into the mid-'80s, while saving the rest of his life for the sequel, I was hoping I would prove the critics wrong and praise it as an underrated gem, and turns out they were right, as this movie was just a mess. The acting is good, especially Jafar Jackson, who makes his late uncle proud, and standouts are when he gets his job as singing and dance moves. Otherwise, the story's a mess. It's not only does it go through the motions of him having a tough relationship with his father from his Jackson 5 days up until adulthood, but other than that, it's just him singing and being famous with little to no conflict throughout, which makes it all the worse when you know the real conflict in his life wouldn't happen until later with all the Neverland scandals and shit. And as a result of this lack of conflict, it just stops with a to be continued with no real conclusion to the story.
Yeah, the ending felt so rushed and so abrupt.
So much like Bohemian Rhapsody, this feels like nothing less than a 2-hour celebration of Michael Jackson with a cliche story you've all seen before. If that's your thing, check it out. But if you're looking for something more fresh than what you find on the Wikipedia article, seek it somewhere else. Seal mediocrity.
Yeah, I thought it was all. To me, it's a mixed bag. The acting was terrific, especially from Coleman Domingo, who did an excellent job of portraying Joe Jackson. I mean, as Joe Jackson, talk about portraying one intimidating son of a bitch. It made me hate Joe Jackson for how he treated Michael and his kids, as well as the rest of his kids. But Domingo's performance was so powerful that this is one of those characters you love that I loved to hate. And as for Jafar Jackson as Michael Jackson, listen, and I am not joking when I say that this is one of the best performances I've seen from a lead actor this year so far. given that Jafar is the nephew of Michael Jackson in real life, the way he mimics his uncle's voice, his movements, and his mannerisms is nothing short of astounding, and he deserves a huge standing ovation for this. Giuliano Valvaldi also does a brilliant job with the way he portrays Michael Jackson as a child, while Nia Long and Miles Teller are also great in the film as well. The soundtrack is fantastic. I mean, come on. We all know the soundtrack is excellent. It had fantastic cinematography. I was also really impressed with the way it handled its theme involving loneliness. And not only did the film have brilliant production and costume design, but the concert scenes and the way they were recreated are just nothing short of phenomenal, especially with the way it was directed, edited, shot, choreographed, and performed. And it also had excellent sound design as well. Now, let's get to why I found the film to be a mixed bag overall. One of my biggest issues I have with the film was the way they handled Michael Jackson's story. Now, I've heard the critics say that Michael has no story whatsoever. I have to disagree because there is a story in this biopic. But what I will agree with them on was the way it was structured. The story felt like I was watching a greatest hits album coming to life rather than a biopic on Michael Jackson. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just when you're making a biopic that covers the king of pop, it should also teach me more about Michael Jackson as well as the struggles he went through. And outside from learning about the Pepsi commercial incident where his hair was set on fire, as well as his bad relationship he had with his father, I honestly didn't learn anything else about the guy due to the story feeling too sanitized. Not to mention that I found John Logan's screenplay to be a hot mess, and that's thanks to not only due to it relying so much on cliches that you've seen in other biopics before, but it also doesn't teach me anything about Michael's siblings such as Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and especially LaToya Jackson, since all of them felt horribly underutilized. Antoine Fuqua tries his best, but his directing couldn't save the film from being saddled from such a messy script. The editing was all over the place, and on top of the film's pacing being such a wonky mess, I'm surprised I'm the only one that noticed this, but there are some CGI effects they used on the animals that looked very sloppy, especially on Bubbles the chimp. Now, while it's understandable why they chose to use CGI on the animals, the problem is that they look like something you'd find in a PlayStation 4 game, and it looks so distracting as a result. And it has one of the most underwhelming endings I've seen this entire year so far. Just like what Soren stated, it's just one of those endings that just basically end on a to be continued. Evidently, there were a lot of rewrites and reshoots made for the third act, and it clearly shows. Overall, is Michael really one of the worst biopics I've ever seen? No. But do I think it could have been a lot better? Yes. While Jafar Jackson delivers such a magnificent performance as Michael Jackson, and there are some memorable and entertaining moments here and there, I unfortunately found Michael to be an underwhelming and forgettable biopic. Unless you're a huge fan of Michael Jackson, I don't think you're missing out. You're missing much on this one. 5 out of 10 or a C+. And you know what? With that being said, before I move on, I am hoping that part 2 will cover the full story. That's what I'm at least hoping. Anyway, speaking of biopics, next up we have I Swear.
And this movie's gotten a lot of attention since Robert Romero beat both Timothy Chalamet and Michael B. Jordan for Best Actor, and I will say he was great as a real-life John Davidson. Unfortunately, the rest of the film I felt kind of blah. It follows the exact same formula for a good majority of the movie. John Davidson tries to live his life, but his uncontrollable outbursts get him into some sort of trouble, lather, rinse, repeat. As a result,
Oh dear.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You were saying?
Yeah, I can. Anyways, in spite of solid direction and the ending being good, they just weren't enough for me to give it a glowing review like everyone else has. I'll probably like the documentary better since it's only 30 minutes as opposed to 2 hours, but I'll definitely never watch this one again, so see you back.
I have to disagree with you, Soren. I think this is one of the better films I've seen this year so far. Now, before I dive into why I felt that, let's address the let's address the elephant in the room. I'm well aware of the incident that happened earlier this year at the BAFTAs, where John Davidson got into some hot water for blurting out a racial slur, while Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were on stage. And look, and what John did was absolutely inexcusable. But the organizers at BAFTA and especially the BBC should also be downright ashamed of themselves for handling this innocent with such negligence by not editing out the racial slur. See, this is why I don't like choosing sides, because it's this is one of those cases where it's both sides' fault when it comes to situations like this. And John Davidson, look, what he did was inexcusable. But what the BAFTAs and the BBC did was much worse. So again, both are at fault. Anyway, with that being said, I nevertheless found I Swear to be one of the better movies I've seen this year so far. This was a hilarious, compelling, thought-provoking, and moving biopic that not only made me learn so much about John Davidson and who he is as a person, but it also made me look and have even greater respect for people with Tourette's syndrome and the struggles that they are having to deal with it in their everyday lives. And Kurt Jones and everyone involved all deserve a round of applause for making a movie that's honest, humane, and authentic with the way it portrays a person that's diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. The story felt highly engaging. Kurt Jones's directing was great, and the screenplay was easily one of my biggest praises with the film. And that's thanks not only to its sharp dialogue as well as having a lot to say when it came to exploring its themes involving identity, empathy, resilience, and acceptance, but how it also did a terrific job handling the subject of a person being diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome in a mature, well-detailed, and humane manner. The acting was terrific. Robert Aramayo was fantastic as John Davidson. It's not hard to see why he ended up winning Best Actor at the BAFTA Awards earlier this year, because what makes his performance so raw and powerful is how, at its core, you could see the pain, the shame, and the struggle he goes through trying to fit in and live a normal life, yet he can't because of the amount of trouble he gets himself into. Because of that, it's one of the best performances I've seen from a lead actor this year so far. Maxine Peake also delivers a brilliant performance as Dottie. And Shirley Henderson and Peter Mullen are also great in the film as well. It's got a great soundtrack. The cinematography was excellent. The editing was very good. And the film's humor works so well. Especially when there were moments John does throughout the film that had me laughing so hard. And not only did it have terrific costume design, but the way it ended felt very satisfying. Now, the only issues I did have with the film is that there's a couple of pacing issues in some spots, and the narrative does fall into some formulaic paint-by-numbers strokes that you come to expect in biopic movies. Not saying that's a bad thing, of course. I just wanted to point that out. But other than that, I really enjoyed this film. I Swear it features a powerful performance by Robert Aramayo, and it's one of the most compelling, thought-provoking, inspiring, moving films I've seen this year so far. and it's hands down one of the better films I've seen this year so far. I highly recommend giving I Swear a watch. 9 out of 10 or an A-. Check it out.
Next up, we have Animal Farm.
Oh, God.
And, okay, I'm not going to be around the bush. This movie's just as terrible as you've heard. The original George Orwell story is a classic for good reason, and the two previous adaptations, for better or worse, do try to capture the dark nature of the subject material, but this movie just treats it all like a joke. Like with last year's Twitch movie, it resembles the book only at face value, and it goes in such a completely different direction that doesn't even make a lick of sense whether or not you've read the book. It goes for cheap kids movie humor that doesn't even belong in a movie like this, with all these needle drops, toilet humor, and pop culture references.
For God's sake! Like, come on!
The animation's not even that great, and neither is the voice acting, as it ranges from just there, like Steve Buscemi and Woody Harrelson, to completely miscast. Like, why the fuck was Seth Rogen cast as a plane again?
Like, what the hell was that casting? Like, even when I saw the trailer for it, it didn't even sound like Seth Rogen was playing the pig. He was just being Seth Rogen for the sake of it. Just that. Like, enough.
The new characters aren't that interesting either. Lucky is your typical underdog or underpaid hero that learns to stand up for himself, and the ending just feels severely unearned. Overall, this did to George Orwell what Illumination's Lorax did to Dr. Seuss. Take a thematically complex story and just flip it over its head in the worst way possible to hand it to young kids. It just goes to show that all adaptations are equal, but some adaptations are just more equal than others. Silver Age.
And before we move on to the next film, I originally was planning to see that movie, but then I decided not to, because do you want to know why I refuse to review any of the movies that are distributed by Angel Studios? Because they're frauds. That's what they are. That's what Angel Studios is. Frauds. They think they represent Christianity and stuff, when in reality they represent the devil. Like, if they're really about like spreading religion, they should be about spreading religion. They should be about that. Not this nonsense that may appeal to like Christian nationalism, which to me is the worst thing that could ever happen to religion.
Yeah,
that's why what? Go ahead.
Look at their pay it forward bullshit. Like,
seriously, I mean, there's a reason why I refuse to watch any of Angel Studios movies, because it's dangerous. They're dangerous. They're frauds. They're crooks. They're and just a bunch of degenerates overall. I usually try to see films with an open mind, no matter what political or religion, no matter what side of the spectrum you come from, whether it's the political or religion. But when you're a company that's basically like using religion as basically propaganda, I'm sorry, but I can't excuse it. Angel Studios should be downright ashamed of themselves. Fuck Angel Studios.
And anyways, Devil Wears Prada 2, speaking of the devil.
Oh, goodness.
Devil Wears Prada 2. As someone who found the first movie pretty average, I was trying to sequel that I didn't hear that much petition for up until release. But I know it's gonna harp on unpopular opinion, but I think it's a bit better than the first, but only because it went from borderline average to above average. My main problem with the first seemed to stem down from me not care for the story and finding Meryl Streep's character a bit too much of a horrible boss stereotype, and I'm happy to say it does improve on them in that the story was slightly more interesting and I found Meryl's character slightly less irritating. But when you get down to it, in spite of a good cast and solid direction from the cinematography to the production values, it is more the same as the first without breaking any new ground. So if you're a fan of the first one, do check out the sequel. If you're not a huge fan, I'd say give it a one-time watch because you might be pleasantly surprised. So seal of adequacy.
I really enjoyed this film a lot. The directing was good. The writing was pretty solid, and that's not only due to it having sharp dialogue, but how it also provided a great insight into the world of fashion, including the major role Italy played in it, as well as a thought-provoking commentary involving the importance of journalism. And you know what? Before I move on, I actually did rewatch the first Devil Wears Prada to prepare myself for this, and I really enjoyed it. And I might have enjoyed the Devil Wears Prada 2 just as much, if not a bit more than the first film. The acting was great, and Anne Hathaway once again delivers a great performance as Andy Sachs. And as for Emily Blunt, she also once again delivers a very good performance as Emily Charlton. Stanley Tucci was hands down one of the biggest standouts as Nigel Kipling. Not only did I find him charming, but there were some lines of dialogue his character says in the film that had me laughing and chuckling throughout. And it proves once again on why Stanley Tucci is one of the best actors working today. But of course, I can't forget about Meryl Streep. She knocked it out of the park once again as Miranda Priestley. It's got a very good soundtrack as well as solid editing. The cinematography was excellent. The costume design in Devil Wears Prada 2 was fantastic and one of the best I've seen this year so far. It's got some moments of good humor sprinkled into the midst, and the way it ended felt so satisfying. If I had to point out some issues I have with the film, it would be that the story did feel a bit uneven and disjointed at times, mainly due to it having too much going on, especially with this one subplot, romance subplot between Andy and Patrick, played by Patrick Bramwell. By the way, he delivers a good performance, by the way. But even still, that romance subplot I felt was really unnecessary, given how undercooked it felt. And not only does it have some uneven pacing issues in the first half, but there were also some other characters that the movie introduced that felt underutilized because of how they're not given that much to do. But despite that, I really enjoyed this movie. I found The Devil Wears Prada 2 to be a funny, endearing, and delightfully entertaining sequel featuring some brilliant performances and banter by Anne Hathaway, Stanley Tucci, Emily Blunt, and Meryl Streep. If you're a huge fan of the first film, then this one is definitely worth checking out. 8 out of 10 or a B+. Very good film. Next up, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Next up, I have Swamped. And after Skyline's Animation failed to impress me with their first two films, it seems like people have called this their best film yet, and they're right. And that is still not good.
Still their best movie, and yet it's still not good.
All right.
Go ahead.
Visually, it's the most impressive of their films, as the creature designs and backgrounds are pretty to look at, and it's got some good music as well. But the problems lie within the writing. Not only is it a generic two species are biased against each other until they learn to work together plot, and a generic Freaky Friday plot, but the characters range from dry to annoying, and the pacing is all over the place, like they're trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. Overall, yes, Gaiden still isn't that great. If Bradbird's ray gun isn't at least decent, this studio is basically damned, especially with John Lasseter still somehow allowed within the mildest career industry, still mediocrity.
Uh-oh, I might get hate for saying that. Oh my god! You know what, Soren? That was really brilliant. Like saying that Swapped is like Skydance Animation's best movie, and yet it's still not good. Oh my god! What a bait switch right there! Oh goodness. Next, okay. I'm sorry. Oh god, oh my god. I need to calm down a bit. I need to calm down. Okay. So moving on. Soren had Swapped. I might as well talk about the movie that I really loved and feel is one of the best I've seen this year so far, Hokum. Now, Hokum centers around novelist Owen Baldman, played by Adam Scott, who after retreating to a remote inn to scatter his parents' ashes, is consumed by tales of a witch haunting the honeymoon suite. Disturbing visions and a shocking disappearance forces him to confront dark corners of his past. When I saw the trailer for this on my showing of Steven Soderbergh's The Christophers, I knew I had to see it right away. And it comes down to one very big thing. This is from the same writer and director, Damien McCarthy, who 2 years ago, if you remember 2 years ago, he did a film called Oddity, which I did review on the podcast, and it was one of the better films I saw from 2024. Especially with how unnerving, disturbing, yet suspenseful and intriguing and mesmerizing the whole thing felt. And hearing that he was coming back to doing this got me excited to check it out. I was also intrigued to see how he was going to execute a horror movie with a premise that's based on a folklore. And after seeing the film, I'm very happy to report that I dug the hell out of Hokum so much to the point where I'm going as far as to say this is one of the best horror movies I've seen this year so far. Hokum was such a compelling, chilling, and gripping ghost story that had me on the edge of my seat throughout it, with how unnerving and creepy it felt, especially when it came to its effective jump scares and creepy imagery. And between this and 2024's Oddity, I feel Damien McCarthy is one of the most exciting filmmakers in horror today. The story felt well-structured and intriguing. The acting was great, especially from Adam Scott, who gives out what is quite possibly his best performance so far. As the novelist, he did such a fantastic job portraying a writer that is definitely a cynical asshole throughout. And yet, as the film progresses, you realize there's a lot more to his character than just being the essential definition of a don't meet your heroes type of guy. Damien McCarthy also did an incredible job with the way he directed this movie, especially when it came to the way he sets up the stakes, the main character being in the hotel, and the full core behind everything, and some good scares. And his screenplay he wrote for the film was also brilliant, and that is thanks to the way it explores its themes involving unresolved guilt, trauma, grief, and redemption. The cinematography was fantastic. Joseph Bashira's musical score I found to be both haunting and absorbing. The editing was very good. And while the slow burn pace, I'm aware, may turn some people off, it actually works here because of how it actually fits the tone and the film's tone and atmosphere, and how it leads into a really good payoff at the end. It had brilliant production design. And since this is a horror movie, I know the one question that comes on everyone's mind is this: is Hokum scary? And to that I say, oh yeah, it is. On top of the film delivering such an eerie and moody atmosphere, as well as building some real tension and dread, 90% of the jump scares in this movie were very well done, especially in terms of how effective they felt, including this one scene involving a TV that actually scared me shitless. And the way it ended couldn't be any more satisfying than that. Now, My only gripe I did have with the film was that while I did say my positives, that 90% of the film's jump scares were effective and very well done, there were a couple of scares, especially one at the beginning, where Adam Scott's character was looking at a certain object that was on the staircase. I won't say what it is, by the way. And that did fall a bit flat due to how I saw them coming from a mile away. Thankfully, that's just only 10% compared to the rest. Yeah, overall, between this and Oddity, I can't wait to see what Damien McCarthy does next. Because Hokum is one of the most compelling, chilling, and gripping horror movies I've ever seen, and it's one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. I highly recommend giving this one a watch. 9.5 out of 10 or an A. Well done, Damien McCarthy.
Next up, Mortal Kombat 2. And after the lackluster first movie 5 years ago, I was hoping the sequel would improve a lot on its problems. And to my surprise, it really did.
Yeah, it did.
It maintains the solid production values and fight scenes of the first movie, while also having better effects and actual focus on the tournament. And instead of What's His Face being the protagonist, we get Carl Urban as Johnny fucking Cage.
Oh, hell yeah.
And the rest
he was one of the best parts of the whole film, hands down.
The rest of the characters are also pretty interesting as well, including Kano, who continues to steal every scene he's in. Granted, the story's pretty predictable, not that interesting, but the movie's not really about that. It's about seeing your favorite characters come to life in fun, gory fashion, making it for one of the biggest surprises of the year so far. So, seal of approval.
I liked it. It's not without its issues, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But Mortal Kombat 2 was definitely an improvement. It was definitely an improvement since this movie did what the first Mortal Kombat film from 2021 tried but failed at being, and that is fun and entertaining. Now, yes, I will admit, when we first reviewed the first Mortal Kombat film on the podcast a few years ago, I did give it a 6 out of 10. But when I saw it again, just to prepare myself for Mortal Kombat 2, this was one of those situations where it did not age well for me. Like this is one of those times where I was like, why did I give this a 6 out of 10? This is not good. And if I remade my worst films in 2021 list, this would probably be my desirable mention. So I lowered my score for the first Mortal Kombat movie from a 6 to a 3 out of 10 or a D+. So I'm really happy to report that Mortal Kombat 2 was definitely an improvement over the first film. First off, the acting was good, especially from Carl Urban, who nailed it as Johnny fucking Cage, especially with the amount of charisma he brought to his character. As for Josh Lawson, he once again stole the entire show as Kano. He was my biggest praise when I saw the first Mortal Kombat movie, and I am so happy they brought him back in this. Especially when there were some jokes and lines of dialogue he says in the film that I had to be laughing so hard. The actress that played Katana, Adeline Rudolph, was very good. I also enjoyed C.J. Bloomfield as Baraka, and Martin Ford was brilliant as Shao Kahn. And that's thanks to how menacing and intimidating his character felt. The directing was very good. The musical score was excellent. The cinematography was great. And when it came to the fight sequences in Mortal Kombat 2, what a huge improvement over the first. Because not only are they a lot of fun to watch, but they were very well choreographed, well directed, and well shot. And the CGI visual effects are both solid and a huge improvement over the first film. And the way it ended actually makes me hungry to see the third film. Now, like I stated before, while Mortal Kombat 2 was definitely a victory, it's mostly a flawed victory. The story felt paper thin and weak. And listen, was I expecting Mortal Kombat 2 to be like The Godfather Part 2 and such? Hell fucking no. But the reason I found its story to be pretty weak in service level is mainly because, in terms of how the narrative was structured, mainly when it came to some of the subplots as well as character arcs, it wasn't fleshed out that well. Not to mention, Jeremy Slater's screenplay could have used some improvement. And that's due to some of the dialogue feeling clunky as hell, as well as some of the other characters that either feel underdeveloped or were just there just to be canon fodder characters. And on top of the film's pacing feeling uneven and chaotic, there were also some editing choices the film makes in terms of the story that came across as being very sloppy. But overall, Mortal Kombat 2 is fun, entertaining, and definitely a huge improvement over the first film. If you're a huge fan of the Mortal Kombat games, or you want to see a fun action movie, then this one's definitely worth a watch. 7 out of 10 or a B.
Next up, The Sheep Detectives. And when I saw the trailer for this, I thought, okay, this could be either really fun or really stupid. And this ended up being the former. It delivers it
did.
It delivers a fun murder mystery that both kids and adults will find themselves enjoying between the solid voice acting, colorful cinematography, and funny jokes sprinkled throughout. And while there are some pacing issues and predictable moments here and there, it's still nonetheless another one of the year's biggest surprises that you also check out, so seal of approval.
This is the biggest surprise I've seen this summer so far. I mean, I could not believe how much I really like the Sheep Detectives, to the point where I would call it one of the better films I've seen this year so far. We rarely see a family movie that's a full-on whodunit. Yet, with how well they executed its out there premise, excuse me. Not only does the Sheep Detective serve well as a great introduction to kids who want to get into the mystery genre, but it's also a funny, intelligent, entertaining, and captivating film that's filled with heart, as well as a relatable and mature message involving loss and the power of memory. The story felt well-structured, engaging, and intriguing. And for Kyle Balda, who directed a few films that I didn't like, such as Minions, The Rise of Gru, and Despicable Me 3, for his first time directing a live-action movie, he actually did a very good job. He did a very good job with this. Oh, damn right! Listen to this. Also, for all the people out there making excuses for other movies that were made for kids, take some notes. This is how you do a great movie. Damn right. Damn right. Damn right. And also, Craig Mason's screenplay is one of my biggest praises with the film. Not only did it have sharp and witty dialogue, but it also had a lot to say with its mature themes and messages involving loss and the power of memory that both kids and especially parents can relate to. The acting was brilliant. Especially from Hugh Jackman, who, despite being in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the film, gives out such a great performance as the shepherd George Carney, and that's thanks to a lot of charm and charisma he brought to his character. Emma Thompson was also great as George's former lawyer, Lydia Harbottle, and she has a couple lines of dialogue that did make me laugh. And on top of Nicholas Golitzine, Molly Gordon, and Hong Chow also delivering some very good performances. The voice acting on The Sheep was also terrific, especially with the two biggest standouts being Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the voice of Lily and Bryan Cranston as the voice of Sebastian. Christoph Beck's musical score and the editing are both very good. The cinematography was terrific, and also, hats off to the animators at Framestore for the way they brought the sheep to life, for the way they utilized the CGI effects on the sheep. The way they were able to bring the sheep to life by striking a perfect balance between realism and expressive energy is nothing short of astonishing. It really did make me feel like the sheep in this were real. And although it's a little too early to tell, I feel it deserves to be nominated for best visual effects. I also found the humor in the Sheep Detectives to be both witty and clever, mainly when it came to some of the sheep's antics that had me laughing throughout. And when it came to the mystery aspects of the film, they were executed very well, especially when it came to the big reveal, no spoilers by the way, that I did not see coming. And the way it ended felt satisfying and moving. Like, this is one of the most satisfying and moving endings I've seen this year so far. Now, my only issues I did have with the film is that there are some pacing issues in the first half, and there were some supporting human characters that did feel a bit underutilized at times. But that's really it. Overall, The Chief Detectives is charming, intelligent, entertaining, and not only the biggest surprise I've seen this year so far, but one of the better movies I've seen in 2026 so far. I highly recommend giving this one a watch. 9 out of 10 or an A-. Well done to everyone involved. Well done.
Next up, In the Gray. And Guy Ritchie's been hit or miss throughout the 2020s, but luckily this is one of his better ones in recent years. It delivers the same sharp dialogue and tight action you'd expect in one of his movies, carried by a solid cast consisting of the likes of Henry Cavill and Jake Gyllenhaal. And while it doesn't quite change the game for the genre and it's got some pacing issues, it's nonetheless a solid film for Guy Ritchie fans and thriller fans in general, so seal of approval.
To me, I really wasn't a fan of this film. This movie was barely marketed. Black Bear provided very little marketing for the film, and after seeing it, it's not hard to see why. Now, to be fair, there are some good things in it. The acting was good, especially from Henry Cavill, Jake Gyllenhaal, Isa Gonzalez, Fisher Stevens, and Rosamund Pike, although not in it that much, who all deliver some very good performances in the film. Guy Ritchie does a solid job with the way he directed the film. The musical score was decent. The cinematography was very good. And there are some action sequences, especially in the third act, that are a lot of fun to watch, especially in terms of how they were directed, edited, choreographed, and shot. Now, here's why the film didn't work for me. With that being said, here's why the film didn't work for me. I found the story to be very predictable. And while I said in my positives that Guy Ritchie's directing was solid, I sadly found his screenplay he wrote for the film to be such an overwritten mess, especially due to its dialogue relying so much on exposition dumps. I also found the editing to be very obnoxious, since it relied too much on text to explain the characters' names. Like, imagine if I did this throughout. Like, here's this. Like this, for example. Hold on. But yeah, just imagine that. Hence my point. It also has its share of cliches that you've seen in other action heist thriller movies before, and I found the film's ending to be very underwhelming as well. Overall, while Henry Cavill, Jake Gyllenhaal, Isa Gonzalez all give out some very good performances, and there are some fun and entertaining moments here and there, I unfortunately found In the Gray to be one of Guy Ritchie's weaker films as a result of it feeling cliche, dull, and forgettable. Unless you're a big fan of Guy Ritchie as well as the cast involved, I can't recommend you check out In the Gray. 4.5 out of 10 or a C. It's not a terrible film, but it's not something I will see again. Actually, Taz, what I was pointing out is like the text, like they used in The Gray. Like, here it is one more time. See? Hence my point. Anyway, moving on to the next film, because I want to save this for last because of how much I really love this movie and how much Søren and I are in a big disagreement with this one. But before I get to that, I want to talk about Is God Is. It's based on the 2018 play of the same name, where it centers around two sisters, Rosine and Anaya, both played by Carrie Young and Mallory Johnson, respectively, who set out on a quest for revenge against their father, played by Sterling King Brown, for disfiguring them as children. going into Iscot is, I didn't know what to expect. The only thing I heard about this film, the only reason I heard about this movie was when I saw a couple commercials for it on the internet, and when I heard about the cast involved. So I went in completely blind, and it's joining Steven Soderbergh's The Christophers in being one of the biggest hidden gems of the year. And it's one that I really wish I had seen in theaters because I really love this film. The story felt engaging and intriguing. The themes, Alicia Harris did an incredible job with the way she wrote and directed this movie, especially the writing, especially when it came to the themes she presents. The acting was terrific, especially from Kira Young and Mary Johnson, both delivering such excellent breakthrough performances as the twin sisters, and they both have great on-screen chemistry as well. As for Sterling K. Brown, oh man, what a performance he gave out as the father. Although you don't see much of his face throughout most of the film, you nevertheless hate his character so much because of what he did to his kids. But Sterling K. Brown's performance as the abusive and intimidating father was so compelling that this is one of those characters you love to hate. Not to mention, Vivica A. Fox, Mykelti Williamson, and Janelle Monáe are also brilliant in the film as well. It's got a really good soundtrack. The cinematography was fantastic. It's very well paced throughout. It's also very funny. And as a dark comedy, it actually works because there were some moments of lines of dialogue as well as some antics the characters get into that actually had me laughing so hard. And there's not a lot of violence in the film. There's not a lot of violence or fight sequences shown in the film. Yet, when there is, are they powerful to watch, especially with how well directed, well choreographed, well shot, and well edited they felt. And it has some fantastic practical effects, mainly when it came to some of the prosthetics and makeup they used in the film. And the way it ended was fantastic. Now, if I had to point out one issue I had with the film, is that there were some editing choices in the film. The filmmates that did come across as uneven at times, but that's really it. I really love this film. It's one of the most entertaining, and it's absolutely, without any shadow of a doubt, one of the most entertaining, thought-provoking, and intriguing revenge thrillers I've ever seen, and it's one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. Check it out. 9.5 out of 10 or an A. Well done to everyone involved. And now oh boy, this film, I've been looking forward to talking about this because here comes our biggest disagreement of the year so far.
Yeah. Obsession. And this is one of those movies I've been hearing a lot about since it came out, so I figured I'd watch it and see what all the hype was about, and yeah, it was honestly okay. Kerry Baker seems to be talented in the directing department with his eye for visuals, and it's mostly well acted, especially from the lead. However, I felt like this could have been way stronger if it was a short film. As is, the story seems bloated, which seems to drag out for the sake of it to the point where I'm just like, alright, I get it. And of course, there's my favorite horror movie trope, the main character being stupid for the sake of the plot, like it takes him way too much time for him to figure out what's going on with his girlfriend. And I know the girlfriend's supposed to be possessed, but there are times where dialogue and/or mannerisms come across as unintentionally laughable. So while
I'm sorry, laughable? What's so laughable about her getting possessed? What's so laughable about that?
I don't know. She just goes a bit too over the top for my taste. So while I get why
there was nothing she could do. She was possessed until something happens. Again, I don't want to spoil anything about this.
Yeah. So while I get why this is getting all this good word of mouth, I'm unfortunately not one to jump on the love train like everyone else is. So see your accuracy.
For me, this is one of the best movies I've seen this year. It takes its simple premise, simple concept of be careful what you wish for, and makes it into a poignant portrait of relationships, codependency, toxicity, manipulation, and desire that made my experience watching the film so overwhelmingly thrilling. And it showed me that writer, director, and editor Curry Barker, who is also a YouTuber, by the way, has a bright future ahead of him as a filmmaker. Yeah, you better watch out, Søren. Better watch out.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to Count Victor on the popcorn panel. He flat out hates this movie.
Victor, you better watch out, buddy. All joking aside, this is one of the best movies I've seen this year so far, and let me explain why. First off, let's talk about the story. To say I was highly invested would be an understatement. It takes its simple concept and makes the narrative feel structured and highly intriguing. The acting was terrific. Michael Johnston did such a brilliant job portraying Bear, especially with how emotionally complex yet ultimately vulnerable his performance felt. And while Megan Wallace, Cooper Tom Tomlinson, and Andy Richter are also great in the film, I, of course, cannot forget about Indy Neverready as Nikki. To say this is one of the most extraordinary breakthrough performances I've ever seen, as well as the best performance I've seen from an actress this year so far, would be a massive understatement. What makes her performance as Nikki so memorable is how she's able to portray a character that manages to be weird, horrifying, and tragic all at once. And she successfully invokes the mood whiplash in so many effective ways. Although it might not happen, I would love to see Indy Neverready get nominated for Best Actress. She was that great. But besides Indy Neverready's extraordinary performance, one of my other biggest praises I have with the film is Curry Barker. His directing was fantastic, especially with the way he crafted the film's atmosphere by making it eerie, unnerving, and chilling, while also building tension as well. As for a screenplay he wrote for the film, I would argue it's one of the sharpest screenplays of the year. Not only was its dialogue sharp and well written, and the characters feeling real and relatable, but it also had a lot to say when it came to exploring its themes involving relationships, codependency, toxicity, manipulation, and desire. And the way he edited this movie was very well done. I found Rock Burwell's musical score to be both eerie and haunting. The cinematography was excellent. It's very well paced throughout. The sound design was fantastic. And since this is a horror movie, I know what's going to be on everybody's minds. Is it scary? 2 words. Hell yes. Besides Curry Barker crafting such an eerie, unnerving, and chilling atmosphere, as well as building tension, like I stated earlier, the way he crafts the scares is remarkable, especially when there were a couple jump scares thrown in the film that caught me off guard and made me gasp. And there was one scene in the third act that actually made me scream. No joke. When this scene happened, I actually screamed in the theater. I rarely scream in the theater, but with this one scene, it's an exception. I literally screamed. That's how scary this one scene was. And what's even more insane about that scene is that one particular scene I mentioned almost got the film the NC-17 rating. Curry Barker confirmed this. That one scene almost got the film the NC-17 rating. And it's not hard to see. Not to mention, there are some practical effects the film shows that are very well detailed and gnarly as hell. The fact it only cost $750,000 to make, yet it looks so well made, astounds me. And on top of that, it has one of the most powerful endings. It has one of the best endings I've seen this entire year. Like, I'm not kidding. When it ended, my jaw immediately dropped, and I couldn't get out of my seat until the second half of the end credits. That's how much that ending really affected me. Like this was like literally me after it was over. I was like, it's like, seriously, that's how much it got me. And honestly, I can't think of any issues I have with the film. This movie was just near perfect from start to finish. Yeah, overall, Obsession is one of the most powerful, compelling, and chilling films I've ever seen. And not only is it the best movie I've seen this summer so far, aside from that one other film we're going to be talking about later on, like in the month, but it's also one of the year's best films. Do yourself a favor and go watch Obsession as soon as you can. After seeing this, I can't wait to see Curry Barker's next film, which is anything but Ghost. And yep, you guessed it, it's joining Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, and Project Hail Mary, and getting this rating. 10 out of 10 or an A+, baby. Well done, Curry Barker, and to everyone involved. Curry Barker, Indy Never Ready, Michael Johnston, and to everyone involved, well done. And let me tell you, this is a good way to end tonight's podcast right there, because this is a really good way to end it right there, because even thinking about Obsession right now makes me want to watch it again. Yeah, that'll end it for tonight's podcast. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. Watching it. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I think Søren did too. So anyway, of course, before we end it all, I can't forget to mention the usual. Be sure to subscribe to Søren the FilmBrony on his YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. Give him the love he deserves. He's a very talented person and a really good reviewer. And check out his other podcast he's in called the Popcorn Panel Podcast. The link is also in the description below. And hey, Mike, thank you for watching, dude. And hey, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm glad you were able to watch to catch that review. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed tonight's podcast. And I already mentioned the things that are in the description below. And until we meet again the very next weekend for episode 72 of the FilmBrony Podcast, I'm going to end the podcast like the way I usually end my podcast. Thanks for watching tonight's podcast, and we will see you all again next time.